Well, hello, everybody. It's Dr. Tezzolino with Elevate Chiropractic coming to you today with an amazingly special guest. I'm so appreciative that she's taken the time to come on here to help all of you out there in our Elevate family and community, along with all those that do come on and just experience this information and knowledge that Nidia is going to be bringing on here. But this is Nidia Elm. She is a child and family therapist with countless years of experience, 15 plus years experience, has a practice of her own where she focuses really primarily on from birth to 5 years old for them and obviously their families, their parents and the families that come along with that, because that is definitely a time in life as well where I know things can get crazy and stressful and things can come about and things can, a need for working on things are very much in need of like your services at times as well. But also has, a professional training and speaking background too, if I'm not mistaken, but, has a certification or training in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, child parenting psychotherapy, amongst many other things. I mean, the list goes on and on there. So thank you, Nidia, for coming on here with us today.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. And my hope and my intention for this is that at some point throughout whatever it is that we talk about and that we say, that at least one little nugget, either as they're watching or maybe later, is helpful or useful to everyone who's going to be watching this. And so I thank you for letting me be here. And I wondered, as we were kind of talking about this and preparing, right now, it being April 23rd, we are in the midst of a COVID crisis. And I wondered to myself, is this conversation that we're having today, would it be any different if it was pre-COVID or post-COVID? And one of the things I thought about is, yes, and I'll get to that, but I also thought about just with parenting, with motherhood, with having children, the thoughts and feelings and experiences that come along with that are very universal, regardless of whether or not we're going through a crisis. And right now, with being in part of a crisis, it is exceptionally important. And a little of what we'll talk about later, which is these facets of self-care and taking care of yourself to be able to take care of other, and really thinking about the importance of relationships in parenting,
Totally.
So, yeah.
Glad you touched upon that because, I mean, is this relatable not only now, but in the past or even in the future? Because, a lot of which that comes across us and impacts us and pushes us into sometimes maybe unforeseen situations and moods or experiences is the accumulation of life, right? Like the accumulation of stress, the accumulation of just things which we're all going to be under. We're under a unique particular storm that's going on right now, but we always have life, right? There's always those opportunities and those experiences and those times that we come to, one difficult maybe to go through in it, right? But even a great thing to kind of maybe learn through an opportunity like this is, one, if you do have challenges, obviously seek the help to be able to get that now, but the things that you can learn and the things that you can instill and those strategies that you can have not only can help get you out of the storm, but help you prepare for the future storms. Because this is not the last one. It may not show up as COVID. It may obviously not even show up as a virus. It could show up as, a death in the family or whatever it is, a life event, right? And like, that's what these all are. I know you're going to really help our community and myself here understand a little bit more about this in, a simple way, because we don't want this to go too long, but and we'll give options for people to be able to explore more in-depth things too, especially with you or even myself in the future. But I always find that, even with myself, I love to know a little bit more about the person that I'm listening to. So maybe you could take just like a quick moment to let those viewers out there know a little bit more about Nidia. Maybe you and maybe how you became or got to go down the route of a child and family therapist.
Sure. So I am not a native of Arizona. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, in the Valley. If you've seen that movie, Valley Girl, totally me. And I am the daughter, I have a brother, but of immigrant parents, one from Italy and the other from Mexico, who both came here in their teens. And so I mention that because that is a big part of why I got into doing what I currently do. I mean, it's been a lot of years. I won't go through all the years, but I started as a teacher because I love children. I was the babysitter you called, and I love working with kids. And I was the teacher that would like write on the board, I'm happy when, or it makes me sad when. And I had someone tell me, hey, you were so great with kids, you should become a therapist. And I was like, great. So I started my work with teens, which is a very interesting developmental milestone stage in life. And then began thinking if I could just go back earlier, like you said, things in life compound, right? And so I would have teens in my office and I would think, well, something happened. What happened? And it happened earlier. So then I started working with younger and younger children. Well, I think no matter what age a child is, even as a teenager, and especially when they're birth to 5, which is the population I specialize in, you're also working with their parents. And there was a period of time where I was working primarily with adults, and they were monolingual, Spanish speaking, non-documented adults. And that's why I mentioned that I'm a product of an immigrant family, because that was a population that we were able to receive a grant for. And there were many refugees in Los Angeles at that time that were seeking safety. I mean, they were coming from war-torn countries in Central and South America, a lot of violence, and that's when I started specializing in trauma. The census or consensus at that time was that children did not have the capacity to express emotions. Like they didn't have all of those emotions. However, and there was a huge study that was done in the 90s around this. However, most parents thought that children should be able to manage their emotions. And so it was this, okay, but they don't have feelings, but you want them to manage their feelings. Or in fact, the opposite is true, where they have a whole bunch of feelings that they hold on to, yet they don't have the capacity to be able to express or work through those feelings on their own. And so,
you're right. They express them in different ways too than you say adults.
They do. Very, very different ways. And so for me, it became very important to think about attachment and to think about the relationship between a primary caregiver, whether, that's mom or dad or a grandparent, anybody, an adoptive family, a foster family, but really looking at that primary relationship and that child, so that I can help the caregivers to really co-regulate with children. And, you mentioned that it looks different and, kind of mixing together, we're in a crisis right now versus what would be typical. Sometimes when children are sad, it looks like anger. They're flying off the walls or throwing chairs or yelling, but that could really be sadness. It could also be fear, and so we as adults have the capacity to use our prefrontal cortexes to make meaning of things and understanding. But children don't, they need help. That's actually a learned behavior.
They're more the primitive brain, right? Like they're more
totally
that amygdala, that thing is just controlling those responses, right? And without having that rational ability to assign reality in that way, right? I mean, that's these kids, especially in those younger years, right? They're all imagination. They're all not reality, right? And then you tie in emotion and then try to deal with that. It's boom, right? And and as you know, we focus a lot on kids, and nearly half our practice is infants and kids, and we see the effects of stress on kids too, and as it shows up differently, whether it be with like a baby with colic and reflux, and ear infections and immune challenges, to a kid may seem like he has a behavioral challenge, or ADHD or sensory challenges, or sleep issues. Like these things, they express differently. Just like you were mentioning, and it's that nervous system that's under this state of stress, and the brain, it responds differently too, and especially when it's under stress, it just responds in a survival mode, right? And especially as a kid, because they live more in that kind of world where they can't process that information properly, because that's what the nervous system does. It takes in the information, processes it, and reacts to it. So if it's not taken in well, or there's areas where it's not developed yet, it can't respond the way that we would like our kids to respond, right? As a parent, it would make it easier, right? But I think with what you're talking about as well, that it helps a parent to understand that their kids are behaving this way for a certain reason, or aware that they are responding this way, not because they're wanting to fight back with mom or dad, but it can be a sign that they're actually overloaded with stress and things that are going on.
Absolutely. And one of the ways to be able to discern those things is to really focus on the relationship that you have with your child, and to get to know your child. Because I'll give an example. I have 2 children, and if let's say they're equally upset about something because I told them no, they can't do this, I set an appropriate boundary. But the way that my daughter is going to respond to that is going to be very different. She will be maybe more vocal about it, versus my son, who will completely isolate, hold on to it, and then may explode later. But they're 2 different kids, and it's the same thing, it's the same situation, but the way that they make meaning of it, the way that they respond to those things or react to those things, is going to be really different. And so as a person and as a clinician, it's really about helping parents to get to know their kids.
Kind of see those telltale signs on what their child will express with, almost like the love languages, right, for relationships, but understand what your child, how they react to certain things that are going on. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, like with even like a gender difference, because I know even like let's say in the world of like ADHD, kids, where that world, usually ADHD shows up more in boys and anxiety shows up in girls. They express differently with this difference. The same stressors that they're under can express in different expressions or different labels or different forms overall too. That's awesome.
I think it's also important to understand that behavior has meaning, and it doesn't always have the exact same meaning. So one of the things that we also do in my practice is we focus on holistic ways of looking at symptoms, if you want to call them symptoms, behaviors. And I am a family therapist because I believe in systems, like a car. The car, has to have several components to it to work as a unit, and that's how it is with the family. There may be a child that, like you said, comes in with these ADHD type symptoms. They're impulsive, they can't pay attention, I always hear like they're bouncing off the walls. Yes, there is research around the chemical nature in the brain of ADHD. And that's not to say that we can't also work with children with ADHD in a non-prescription way. We can use the relationships that child has, understand when the behavior is coming out in that way. What is the child trying to say? Because if you have a brain that has difficulty organizing, like it does in ADHD, words for feelings are not going to be easily accessible. So we work a little bit more on words for feelings. Options for how to respond to things are not easily accessible. So we work on ways to be able to help the child respond and focus on that word help, because children can't do it alone. A lot of adults have a tough time doing it on our own. We're wired to be relationship.
Totally, and I'm glad you kind of touched on it as well as, which is the common route. Let's say, I don't know why we're picking on ADHD, but let's go with it. With that, let's say with any sort of condition, you can medicate a symptom, right? In which you could change a symptom oftentimes. But, further deep looking at it, it's like, what has happened on the front end that's created in the first place, right? It's like, are we just kind of going to treat a symptom? Or we're going to look for like an initial cause or contributing factor that's creating the symptom, because that's really how the nervous system works. So I get input in, process, and react. If we don't like the behavior, the best way is to look at what's the input, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe learn ways on how to, one, improve the input, or also to help the brain and body deal with that input, that it's being managed, so that then the output is different and it's catching it on this front end rather than just kind of dealing with the symptom side of things. Right.
Exactly.
And no matter what the label is, we were picking on ADHD, but it doesn't matter if it's anxiety or oppositional defiance, or if there's no label and it's just some behavioral thing, right?
Right. So anxiety can be, let's say, our catch-all, and you can replace that with ADHD, like you said, or oppositional defiance, whatever it is. So it's, it's multifaceted. Okay. So yes, even when there's a chemical base to it, we see that there's an inability to make sense of what's going on in the body, okay? And so it comes out with certain behaviors, and then a parent will have a response to that. Well, over and over again, that becomes a habit. You and I have had several conversations on this, and this is why I use chiropractic care, is because the brain and the body, the most powerful thing we have is our central nervous system. And there are parts that we don't fully understand, but what we do know is that there is a brain body connection that is incredibly powerful. And so we were talking about the amygdala, the feeling part of our brain. And pre-COVID, during COVID, when your body goes into crisis, like, it needs to act, and we need this response system. Otherwise, we would literally sit here and do nothing all day long, right? So we need to have some sort of.
Right, that's how the human race is made at this point. We need to go to that fight, flight, and
exactly.
have that. We just don't want to live in it.
Right. But what happens is that when these maladaptive patterns of relating happen, our body stores all that memory. So if we're frequently going into this space of, I have a feeling inside as a child, and I'm trying to communicate this, and my caregiver doesn't understand this, my body is going to hold on to that. And so in our work, at our practice, it's really about doing those multifaceted things, understanding, okay, what's going on, what has been going on, how have these patterns been created, where are we now, and how can we calm the body to a space where now we can work with accessing the thinking part of our brain and increasing coping skills. Does that make sense?
It does absolutely. Maybe because, with understanding, because I understand neuroscience, right? Because, when we go to stress, we get out of the prefrontal cortex, right? That front brain that makes us think well, right? And we go preambulate. So that's where you say, to help viewers out there understand what happens when we go to that state of calm and can create that environment. What we're doing is literally pulling ourselves, or the person you're dealing with, pulling out of that primitive fight, flight response. And when we can get to that point, help the brain be in that more calm state, now it focuses more on the focus and cognitive part, right? And then you can actually think, and then you can actually rationalize, and then you can actually restore and regenerate and do those things that, the body should be in. And that's the thing I find too, oftentimes, in these kiddos and challenges, when they have these stress patterns from life, they get stuck in this sympathetic dominance. This gas pedal is just stuck on, And oftentimes just with the nervous system, it learns. So it builds a really big gas pedal, and the braking system, without it being used over time, it gets weaker and weaker. So it gets harder for the kiddo or the person or the parent to get out of that mode to that calming side of it too, right? And that's so where that working through it and doing those things to get to that calm and that balance is so critical, to then get to the learning part, to then get to the calming part, to then get to the, creating those strategies to create then a better life, right? I mean, to help a parent that has a kiddo that the parent and the family is just getting destroyed by stress, in addition to what's created in the first place, right? Because any parent that goes through any challenge, right? As a parent, I'm a parent, like if anything happens to our kid, we get a little pinprick. We're like, right? But especially when it's a chronic challenge, a behavioral thing that's day in, day out all the time, it feeds on itself. And that's how the nervous system learns over and over, those patterns, like you said. And that's where breaking those patterns, interrupting those patterns are so important. But the first thing is, like you said, getting that calm.
It is. And I think one of the things that we do when something happens with our child as well is we blame ourselves. And so now we add this shame and this guilt onto ourselves and all of these negative thoughts. And what does that do? That puts us into that exact same state. So now we have a parent in that state, a child in that state, and we're ramping each. Yes. Yeah. Right. And exactly. And so, there was a time where child therapists would just see the child. I can't imagine that, because a child is not this isolated being in the world. They need their parent, their caregiver, to be there. And so a lot of the work that I do is with the parent, and having the grace for self and working on the self so that they can be self-regulated and in a place to be able to have space to be a secure foundation for the child who is actively going through these really big struggles.
The parent has to be the calm, right? There's got to be still the calm.
And it starts with the parent, and a parent. We are really oriented towards hope. We're a practice that focuses on the positive, focuses on strengths and capacities as the grounding for all of the work that we do. And there's an orientation towards this hope. And so a parent that comes in, which happens all the time, like, I don't know what happened, like, I can't deal with this, I'm so overwhelmed. Yeah, that feels really overwhelming. It does, because it feels that way. And let's think about ways that we can work through this. Okay, what can we do? What do we know? What are the strengths around this? Because even that child that's really, really struggling, they've got some good stuff too. And so playing up those with the parent and with the child, then that will go as rapidly and build upon each other as much as the negative stuff,
The other way.
I didn't hear that, sorry.
So you can feed either the one way, the stress way, or feed the growth and the restorative way. Exactly. So help them. That's awesome. Let me ask you this one question too. I know there's a lot of things that you deal with, but is there any more common challenges, maybe like top 3 to 5 things that people that you just see all the time, like whether it be ADHD, whether it be this type of situation, whatever it is there any common ones that you kind of see on a consistent basis just kind of coming to you?
Right now, I have a mix of seeing just adults, like in individual sessions, as well as couples, and then part of my practice is with families, so families of children birth to 5. So for the individuals, the big things are depression and anxiety. I am on major insurance panels. So when you like look me up, it will say focused on trauma. So I do work with a lot of individuals who've experienced a trauma. And with children and families, things like just a parent who comes in and says, I don't know what to do with my child. Like I tell them to do something and they just don't do it. And I am one of those clinicians that is, you know, I'm very weary about diagnosing anything before age 6 because our DSM is, you know, for age 6. So I'm very open about that. So
I think that's it right there, is like that overloaded parent that just doesn't know what to do,
yeah.
right? That's, and that could, because it doesn't matter what the label is, like, you know, you and your practice, me and my practice, like it labels the label, even if they don't have one, it doesn't matter. But I think that is what most parents that either seek myself out, even yourself, they're like, they've one, either been everywhere and not got the answers, or two, they're just totally fed up, don't know what to do, and just is looking for something, right? And that's, I think you hit it right on the head. It doesn't need to be any multiple ones. It's just like, that is the key to help them get out of that state where they're coming in at. That's awesome. Now, let me ask you this, as far as with your services, do you go to an individual's home? Do you have an office that you see people at? What is like the dynamic with the services you provide?
Oh, it depends.
So you have that capability as well.
I do. So
and
I always...
And probably now with some teleservice or telemed stuff too right now.
Well, right now, everything is exclusively telehealth. I do, like I said, I have clients who have some autoimmune things going on. And so I have to be safe to be able to keep them safe. And so everything's been on telehealth, which I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of getting used to. And sometimes it feels like we're in the same room. And so it's been really great. Yeah, and you know, parents use their phones and like show what they're doing, or they'll set it up somewhere. And so I'm still able to be there. I'm not going to be the clinician who's constantly doing in session. I'm really going to be kind of like a participant, a facilitator in those sessions. So we do have an office, and our office, I think it's super cute, is off of the 17 and Peoria. And it's 2 separate rooms with like it looks like a little living room in the middle. So we do have an office. Like I said, right now we're doing primarily telehealth. I always like to do an intake in the office. It's just been my general practice. And then, you know, I really believe if we're going to help shift the family, sometimes it's nice to see that in the home. I've had parents say, well, they act one way here, but then the second we get home, it's completely different. And so if I am there as the observer and utilizing my assessment skills, it's really nice to see it in the environment that it's occurring in, because I get to zoom out and I get to maybe see things that we miss because we're in it, right? And so those could be things that are really, really important. So
nice. Get away from the, you know, the tree and to see the forest, right? Like, yeah. Well, that's awesome to be able to have those capabilities, being so versatile and having those different types of options in a typical setting too, even though we're in a unique situation now for a little bit. But, you know, what is the, for those viewers that are out there that have like additional questions, they are like, holy cow, I need your services. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So what I can do is I can give you some of my business cards. We have an office line. So I have a wonderful case manager that organizes my schedule and is able to set up intakes and things like that. I also have an email address. And with all of this going on, I'm putting together kind of like one of those listserv things where here's what I think is interesting, here's what I think would be helpful. And so if they wanted to be part of that mailing list, they could. And so just most recently, there's a book that's printable on explaining to your kids everything about COVID in a trauma-informed way, understanding the feelings that children are going through right now, and then talking through that. So it's not like a book, but it's a way to kind of show some pictures and pick through. So I'll be sending that out within the next week. So by phone and email is always great.
What's the phone number?
Oh, okay. Oh yes, because they're going to be watching this. That is true. Okay. So the main number is 602-599-2000. So 602-599-2000. And then
person.
Go ahead, say that again.
And what if they're more of a computer email type of person? What's your email that's the best to reach you at?
So it's my first name, which is Nidia, Nidia .elm, ELM, at intercessory.org. And intercessory is INTERCESSORY.org.
Awesome. Nidia, thank you so much. That was so informative with everything that we go through here, you know, and I know with our practice community, with the kids and families that we see, I know a lot, you know, we see a lot of kiddos with some of those challenges, whether it be the sensory challenges, even those birth defy, which I know you have a ton of knowledge, and that's where you focus a lot of your practice on as well. They're going to benefit from just even some of the basic stuff that we've gone through here. I know there's so much more. We could hang on here for hours and really dive in deep here, which I'd love to maybe even do in the future. But
I would be happy to do like a part 2, because we didn't even talk about like basic strategies because there are so many things.
Let's do version 2 with this as well. Let's set something up and we can just kind of go through a basic strategy session maybe overall from your each of our ways and strategies around that. That would be awesome. But thank you for coming on today. It was awesome. I had a really great time. I know everybody out there has gotten at least one thing, if not, I mean, holy cow, we've got to probably, you know, when I sit down and go through this, I'm going to be taking a ton of notes as well to be able to help myself too along with this. So thanks so much for coming on and investing the time here. Thank you for everybody out there for taking the time to view this. If you have any questions, obviously contact Nidia. If you have got any further questions for her, myself, you know our contact information here at Elevate Chiropractic. You can call, email, whatever way is easiest for you. Really appreciate every single one of you out there in our community. Until next time, be elevated.